Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you are all doing well on this wonderful evening where I'm at and wherever you may be. Let me change my microphone settings there real quick. So we're using the good mic, not the webcam mic. And hello, I hope that you're all doing well. Yes, good evening, friends. Good evening, one and all. I hope that you all had a lovely day. Thankfully, my schedule is not as out of whack as I thought it would be. This morning, I was called in to my civic duty of jury duty, which I have not done since turning 18. I've done jury duty as the side of working for attorneys, never actually being a juror myself. So that was fun to deal with for the first time as a grown ass man. But I figured that today I would give you all a wonderful little discussion and then, of course, take your questions. And we'll be enjoying ourselves for a long discussion and cozy evening. I have the OBS camera turned on, but we will quickly transition to using my face here very shortly. But one of the things that I wanted to sort of do for this evening is sort of just to update everyone on what I am currently working on, what am I doing, what have I been up to as of late. I've been a little bit of everywhere these last couple of weeks on other shows and appearances, and we're also going to talk about some stuff that I have in the works in terms of writing, because I made it my New Year's resolution for 2024 to write more, and I have a lot of that going for me, including in some printed magazine publications. So, um, yes, hello to the usual people in chat: Minoan, Sean Weiland, Seneca, Scribe. Hello, everybody. We also are streaming over on Twitter, or X, as they like to call it these days. So if you're hearing me over there, welcome. And I can see your comments thanks to StreamYard, so I can always pull those up if I'd so like. But the fun thing as of late has been actually forcing my ass to write, which has been great. Uh, in part because I think it's always difficult when you don't have a reliable muse. So, for instance, at my old job, I had to drive all over the area where I live, and I would always see different parts of the rural areas that I live around. And it was always a pleasure to be on the open road and to see strange things, or to see farmland, and to see how sort of the country mouse reacts to the encroachment of the city mouse and the land developments. And you always had something to write about. So a good friend of mine, Conscious Caracol, always notes that my inspiration, my muse, is the open road, and it's certainly true. Although these days that's not so much the case, because I don't drive nearly as much as I used to. But thankfully, I've been very blessed in terms of what I've been reading and what I've been doing IRL, so to speak, to keep myself certainly very busy in terms of writing. And a lot of that, of course, has been focused on the usual pop culture take. I'm kind of surprised that the Helldivers essay did as well as it did. But hey, I get to do what I originally wanted to do, which was write about video games. Prior to taking on the amphibious mantle of the Prudentialist, and for those old heads, I used to have an Edmund Burke PFP. I had bought my PC parts and I put it all together early in 2020 in the midst of the lockdowns and before GPU prices went through the roof. And I put myself a PC together, and I was like, great. This has some great, audio visual stuff included, so I can record high quality game footage, and I can talk about video games and do it what every other sort of like mid-20s white guy does who wants to write video essays. Like, why not talk about the video games that he plays all the time and justify it? Thankfully, to some extent, that never happened. And there are other people that do good video game and culture essays. I know Argent's probably one of the best people that does that sort of stuff. And his commentary on the Ukraine war, the Ukraine cinematic universe, has been pretty interesting. So you've got that, but nevertheless, it's fun when you get to originally do what you plan to do in life. And I have all these like half-written scripts that I keep telling myself one day these will go on a second channel, and then it never happens, and then it never happens, but one day it will. But yeah, hello Pete Budapest, hello everyone. Going the way of the distributist. Oh, I've done AMA streams before. It's no big deal, but I know Dave recently did one. I listened to it; it was quite good. And then we'll get the webcam up and running. Am I doing something for the Passage Prize? I had sent off a poetry submission, so that's what I did. I sent off a poetry submission, and that will be probably. And I didn't do it for the first 2 years, and I feel bad that I haven't. But I haven't had enough time to write, in the same way that I owe my friends over at the Double Dealer magazine. I owe them some short stories and some fiction, and because this is the terrible tragedy, is I used to write a lot of poetry. I used to write a lot of uh, fictional stories when I was younger and in college. However, once you start doing more and more legal writing, and you start doing more and more like grant writing, because that's what I do. I'm a professional progressive in that sense. I do a lot of grant writing, and it stops a lot of people from flexing off their creative muscles. So I have to take that weary volume off the shelf and crack its spine again and read it to help remind myself that I used to write a lot of fiction and a lot of poetry, and I'm trying to be better about it. I have some poems on here, but yeah. And here we go. Chat is already being its usual self, but it wouldn't be a stream without it. But let's go ahead and get that camera on here in a second. Let's take a look. There we go. Hello. Hi, everyone. I hope that you're all doing well. This is a long day for me. I've been up very early doing an unhealthy amount of just sitting around waiting for attorneys to make their decisions about who they're going to hire and such. But thankfully, I will be off and away from that. I wasn't selected for a jury. And it was very funny because I used to work for attorneys. I used to be a paralegal. I did CLE and stuff like that. I took classes. And it was always a lot of fun. But I woke up one day managing like a 3-story residential building. And we're a bunch of attorneys, and I collected the rent. I managed the place. I kept it clean. I was usually the last person to leave. And all of a sudden, it was just, I realized I was absolutely miserable. I wasn't going to bother with it. I didn't want to go to law school. Turns out legal writing transitioned quite well to the nonprofit stuff that I do now, IRL, and it's the long story kind of stuff that I was. Hello, Spud Ruckus. Hello, everyone. But yeah, was a professional. Oh, in some respects, but not really. Alone in the Woods. I wouldn't say I was a professional. I'm a professional progressive now, just because I work in the charity sector. But yeah, we'll just go ahead and get started with the questions. Always welcome anyone who is watching to, of course, I'd like to pay attention to the paid chats first. For those who are asking questions, you can do so via Entropy. But as the Franklin likes to say, the Spurg chat is perfectly fine as it is. So Pete Budapest asked me what kind of young adult was I, or kid, in high school and college. Nerd, athletics, artistic, a little of everything. Little of everything, Pete Budapest. I did cross country. I did speech and debate. I did theater. I still, played a few instruments at the time. I don't do that anymore, but thankfully I can still read music, which is helpful for what I do now with respects to the singing I do. So yeah, I had jury duty earlier this year, and it was filled with, well, I'm sorry to say that, but your name 1360 Survivor is probably a really good username, and that's a good one. If you're not on Twitter, you should use that username, and you could start talking about statistics on the daily. But odds are you've got a lot of stiff competition, because a lot of people do that already on Twitter. When did I first find Academic Agent? One of the earliest streams, whenever the first stream AA did with Carl Benjamin, that was probably the first time I heard him. So it was like, I don't know, 5, 6, almost 7 years ago at this point. That's for, so probably like 6 years ago at the best. And I had been listening to AA for quite a while at that time. He's got some of those great econ videos about like Zimbabwe and other countries throughout the world, which was pretty good. And yeah, Alone in the Woods, like the one thing that like that Data and Society report about like the pipeline, it was very real. This is one of those few instances where, as Covey Fanon would say, the woke are more correct than the mainstream. So you would definitely, I definitely would say that is, that pipeline was very real. Definitely true. Oh, but yeah, it's something that, so it's been a long time. And so before when the day I guess I decided to make a channel and to make a video was, I was sitting, it's been almost 4 years ago. It's crazy I've been doing it for this long. And that's 2020 was nearly 4 years ago. Can you believe it? I know we're right around an election year. It's been 4 years, but it's still crazy to think about. But no, I was sitting on dialysis and I was listening on my phone because they don't want you to bring a computer or anything to the dialysis center. So I couldn't just like sit down, plug in, and do any work. So I was just listening to my phone and I was listening to it was some sort of stream where it was like Academic Agent, Don the Pleb, and a few others that were talking about strategy, discussions over populism and rear guard actions and entryism and stuff like that. And so I was like, oh, I can do this because in real life and with in my time in university, I was always the like contrarian conservative. By at that point in time, it was always more oriented around of like, well, so I was quote unquote one of the good ones, and that's a phrase that I hate when it comes to being on the right, because you would have just your liberal friends ask for a different opinion that wasn't on the paper of record, the New York Times, so I could cite something from like the Heritage Foundation or the National Review or Reason Magazine, because we always had. I think a lot of people had a libertarian phase, and God knows that I did, and I thank God every day that I'm not a libertarian anymore. But so yeah, it was about 4 years ago, and I just started listening, and I was like, well, why not? Because they would always ask me for opinions, and I thought, well, if anyone could give it a shot, why not me? And I quickly recorded, a short little take about how both strategies could be used, and then lo and behold, it made it work. And I've been blessed ever since to have you guys watching your audience, your ears, your eyes, your readership, your viewership. I'm very grateful for that. It's been a crazy time. But yeah, let me go on and keep finding questions. Am I concerned that I will eventually have to move from Texas with the ongoing invasion? I am in Idaho, and the country my daughter is growing up in is frightening, to be honest. Well, I mean, Idaho is not a bad place to be. A lot of people have left California for Idaho, but I don't see myself leaving, not where I'm at least, and I'm putting in a lot of labor and groundwork to, at the very least, be somewhat self-sufficient. I mean, I work very closely with quite a few of us in certain parishes to get a food cooperative going, and that's finally beginning to get off the rail or off the ground with respects to paperwork and such. So I mean, that gives you a way to provide food and to also somewhat legally discriminate in that sense to make sure that your fellow laity are taken care of. But I don't see myself leaving unless I absolutely have to. And that's just sort of where it is. And geopolitically and also just in political realism, Texas is still way too important to give up entirely. And I mean, also, I think that for instance, like Super Tuesday was not too long ago. And I'll admit, I voted in Super Tuesday. I voted for the Orange Man. I know democracy's bad. Democracy's a sham. It's this fake and gay ritual that we all participate in. And I participated in it. And some of the like propositions for the state of Texas were just like, we should have gold. We shouldn't we should, do more to like kick illegals out. We should be able to send the National Guard to the border at all times. We should be able to do we should prevent foreigners from owning land from like China and Iran and South and North Korea and stuff like that. And I was just like, those are not too bad of not too bad of things to to suggest for. And it was funny because like my parents called me and they're like, these sound really secessionist. And I'm like, well, the hour is nigh. Not saying I'm a big Texit proponent or anything like that, but the more political autonomy that you can have, the better. And unfortunately, just a lot of the GOP, one, besides the whole beautiful losers phenomenon, has this huge problem where they just lack imagination. So, for instance, like Governor Stitt from Oklahoma, he recently did the whole banning of DEI and other administrative officials inside the Oklahoma university system. Great idea. He could go further. Any one of these governors could go further, in my personal opinion. Unfortunately, no one is there to give him that push. And no, Seneca, I'm not answering the safe question, but yeah. I was. It'll be 3 years since the transplant in June, so that'll be the answer there. It's been 3. Yeah, it'll be 3 years this June. But I'm gonna go check over on the Entropy chat real quick. There we go. I won't stop until total Texas victory. Well, I mean, you have to be realistic. Unless we start deporting a lot of people and unless we have clearer ballot measures to prevent precinct captains from voting in place of you know, I mean, this was the greatest problem with a lot of mail-in stuff was just ballot harvesting. I mean, yes, shady shit did go on in 2020, but a lot of that shady shit did come from obvious declarations of emergency, and again, the classic Schmittian stuff, right? Like, uh, wherein you will witness people change the electoral rules. We saw this in like places like New York and Pennsylvania, anywhere where there was like major sketchy shit going on in 2020. You saw that where there were changes to the rules where the courts would then say afterwards that no, these things were done and changed up on and things like that. And that's something to keep in mind, right? And that's a big deal to consider. Is that there's a lack of imagination. But I think that the other thing to consider, though, when it comes to what's happening here or what's happening anywhere else, is that you're just going to have to find a place to, as Conscious Caracol says, like, there's times to dig a trench and there are times to retreat. But it's the same thing with what we talk about all the time in these spaces. And I do wish that there were more argents in the scene where people were talking about movies and critic that weren't just the critical drinker, which not to say that he's a bad guy. I just saw like he has a trailer out. They like indie funded one of the a film for the novel series that he's been working on, which I'm hopeful for. But it would be nice to see more of our guys talk about pop culture, because we don't do that anymore. We kind of just skip over it. Like, why are you watching the slop? Well, someone should criticize the slop. Someone should talk about why it's bad, and someone should tell me all the time what to watch and what not to watch. And I mean, to some extent, Mystery Grove does this, although I recall Mystery Grove famously tweeting about how good Avatar 2 is going to be, and then it all fell apart. But the original movie list is not a bad list to say the least. So, I mean, things to consider, right? But I do want more people to do that sort of stuff, right? For sure. And then Witticism TV, you're doing the famous bank thing. I would suggest trying this. You're Indian, aren't you? You're asking all these basic bank questions. Sounds like Tub Girl, the discourse. Uh-oh. I'm a big fan of Mystery Gross film lists, but Avatar sucks. I mean, the first Avatar to me was just like an amalgamation of let's criticize American imperialism. I mean, like, it was so blatant. You had the stars and stripes in the background with the general talking, or the colonel, I forget what his name, Quaritch or whatever. And at the same time, it's Dances with Wolves, but with blue space people that screw each other with their hair instead of anything else. So I mean, that would be the thing to consider, right? But I didn't watch Avatar 2. I haven't seen a lot of new movies. I did do a couple of features, reviews, and discussions in 2023. I did watch Elvis, and I quite disliked it, although I can see why some Zoomers I know liked it a lot. But on the other hand, not so much for older people, because I went in and I saw it like on a matinee, and it was really funny because it was a bunch of like, people who grew up with his music, like older white people. And then, of course, the first trailer they played was that, gay rom-com bros. And like, you could visibly hear someone go like, well, fuck this. And it was just really entertaining to just listen to some boomer just go like, mouth off and just shit on the film. But on the other hand, it was for them, they were trying to understand the movie and trying to understand, and appreciate Elvis Presley, the artist, and to have a biopic about him, to which I know very little about Elvis. And I thought that the film, outside of its obvious sort of racial pandering, it did pretty good stuff, but it wasn't bad. But the base boomer is always an appreciative trope in that respect. Do I like the hype? Well, I feel like that's an easy answer. Yes. I mean, we focus too much on what is already right in front of us, way too much right now. And that's actually something I did want to talk about, and I'm going to rant a little bit about here before I answer any other questions, is I noticed that, there's this concept in the sort of historical as well as sort of literary critique and analysis space, as well as in the academic discipline itself. And this is the term called presentism, which is, of course, the application of modern day morals and modern day standards to older pieces of work, literature, as well as the historical understanding of things. So, for instance, this is why you'll see a lot of people automatically say, well, like the past was an evil, racist, and bigoted place. Well, to today's standards, that's absolutely true, which is why when you say that you have the political standards of your grandparents, they look at you like some evil medieval reactionary, right? Because all of a sudden you have the takes of your grandparents, and depending on when they were born, that could make you incredibly far right to them. Whereas to me, I think that just makes me very sensible and not really fringe or extreme, just what this country used to be like all the time. However, the materialism, I think, is always about this culture of the now. I call it the eternal now. And this was a Substack essay I put out for subscribers and lovely people who can support me there, whether you're a channel member or you're a here, I'll just put it up on screen so everyone can see it, because that's the nice thing, right, with sharing screen. So here we go. It's called Progressive Presentism, the Politics of the Eternal Now. You're just seeing the first paragraph here, which everyone can see, regardless of the paywall or not. But I mean, whether it's about the whole Gamergate 2 stuff that's happening with Sweet Baby Inc., or all this new discourse about Haiti coming back into the forefront, and we're viewing all the terrible, ethnic genocide of the Haitian Revolution, and we're applying it through like modern, gay race communism takes of progressives in 2024, which has been more or less the same sort of take since 2014 and since 1994 or 1974 from some of these lefty critics, where they're really stoking the fire for what they're being mask off, which I can appreciate the honest formalism about it. But everything is about now. So it applies this present attitude towards now. Everything is about now. The future will still have the problems of now, but they'll be solved. But we use everything about the present day as a hermeneutical tool to view the present, the past, and the future. And so, time is out of joint, as it is said in Shakespeare's Hamlet. And for us, that there is no future for progressives. I mean, it's all about the now, because everything has been hyped up to this radical state of existential dread and crises, to where nothing else matters, because the present threat is people like you and I. And so in order to get over the present, the present must be killed in order to get to the future, where the present problems of today are then reflected back on how we solved them, but they're never really cozy or answering those kind of questions. It's the same way how like Star Trek, for example, talks about, oh, well, we overcome our need for money and private ownership of things, this like weird space communism. But at the same time, Star Trek is also a post-apocalyptic future where millions of people died in World War III and the eugenics wars. And you see this in Star Trek First Contact, where like Montana and the rest of Earth is a shithole because of war and they're trying to rebuild. And so it's all of a sudden, you kind of understand in hindsight, oh, look at that. These guys are genocidal maniacs. This is the only way that like post-scarcity can be achieved. It's the Thanos option, right? If we just billions must die, but it's the chuds that go and not us, we will be the successors. And this will allow us to, goon eternally until we rot away off this mortal coil, and, the colored tide of the world will take over and everything will be perfect this way after our own orgiastic annihilation. They're like, insects that will die shortly after orgasm in that respect. And that's sort of the present viewpoint of progressivism. And of course, it's very materialistic in that sense. Everything is about having nice things, to a point where, a few years ago, the Chapo Trap House sort of bit about treats. Oh, you don't have your treats because you don't have a functioning society. They'll treat that as just some sort of optional thing. Not having a roof over your head and knowing where your next paycheck is coming from. That's all you need. Whereas, you start taking away their Mexican fusion cuisine places because we've reduced immigration or something. It's the end of the world to these people, because it's all about trinkets and bobs and baubles. Because, for a lot of these people, they don't, as long as they have their playthings, they have no problem going along with it, because there is it's a slave mentality. And you see that more so in the progressives than you do on the right, Christian or otherwise. It's just plainly there. And that's a big problem with the hyper materialism. It's just part and parcel for what we deal with. Something to consider on that end. So I think it's important to take a look at that. Seeing that how the U.S. is in decline, who do you see taking the reins? There doesn't seem to be a clear successor. This is where I think you get a lot of people talking about the concept of deglobalization And deglobalization in literature is more or less what it's nicely put as the nice, quiet return to sort of pre-international post-war order, where there are parts of the globe that are carved up into spheres of influence, or returning to a more 19th century style. And this is how the lit is written. I mean, there's a lot of papers that have been put out, both from the Council of Foreign Relations and a lot of other sort of regime think tanks and pieces. I mean, even the Center for a New American Strategy, right? You know, with one of the Kagans, who runs that thing. Robert Kagan, I think, is the one who started it. And he was on CNN like a year and a half ago talking about war gaming with China. But these deglobalization pieces are more or less about how the larger superpowers will be more regionalized. And so trade will become more regionalized. And it's going to be about access to resources, shipping and trade and access lanes. And we're kind of beginning to see how this is handled with response to the ongoing logistics crisis. I mean, this is, guys like what's going on with shipping, or with what Huntsman talks about, just seeing how Americans' powers not being able to respond to these ongoing challenges. And there's a great lecture from a gentleman over at Wheaton College who said, the supply chain crisis is decades in the making, and it has been. Because things that we take for granted, things that are, easy and convenient, are oftentimes not designed to be anti-fragile. So we have a very fragile system, and that will probably be the immediate thing that's going to be, there will be retrenchment. And as long as, you have some, power force projection, you can still do a lot on the world stage. It just means that we're going to see other stuff like that play out in the world. So I'm not too sure how much you will see one big unipolar moment emerge from some other guy. It will be more lines drawn in the sand, and we're already beginning to see that. Imagine Clash of Civilizations, but it's going to just be based upon who can put troops anywhere in the world in rapid order, and I imagine that will be the case. It will be a hybridization of trade and military alliances, as well as utilizing strong ethnic and historical ties. So I imagine that there will be parts of the world where it will be far more, they'll have closer relations against the U.S. They'll have far more closer relations with the Chinese, and so on. But again, this is what's written on paper. There's a lot of critiques against it. But as for right now, I don't think that it'll be one single power that rules over all. And despite the United States having massive problems, because, for instance, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a national security threat. Our open border is a national security threat. I mean, if all these Republicans want to talk about going to bomb the cartels, I would recommend, I don't like this person's username, just out of personal taste, but the person's called Catgirl Kulak, has a great article about why going to war with Mexico would just be a fucking nightmare. Just because so much of the southern border is, the cartel money in relations to corrupt officials. It would be bad, right? And then not to mention the internal politics. Like, let's say an American drone operator, right? Like, say some right-wing drone operator gets doxxed by some libtard. And then all of a sudden, like, the libtard inadvertently just got right-wing drone operators, family chainsaw beheaded, like it's a live leak video. There's a lot of problems there, and I don't think that gets discussed enough by anybody. But I would highly recommend that you read that piece. It was very good. And then one was sent there's a couple of super chats that have come in. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. Not that I'm here to grift, but your donations greatly appreciated. 1,000 subs with no videos for $2. My favorite cartoon / anime growing up. Oh man, this is where I get to disappoint everybody, right? So I grew up with Armed Forces Network and PBS. So I suppose what was ever really on there. I mean, I grew up with a lot of like Disney and Don Bluth like films as a kid, as so many other Americans born in the 90s did. But I had a favorite cartoon or anime growing up. I wouldn't be sure to tell you. I didn't watch a lot of anime as a kid. I only started watching anime in my like mid-20s. It was never really my deal. My best friend from high school tried for 3 years to get me to watch stuff, and I was like, that ain't for me, man. Maybe it was my like American chauvinism. I was like, that shit isn't for me. But I mean, in my mid-20s, I started watching some stuff, which isn't bad. Like I said on the Digital Archipelago, I like Steins Gate, for instance. So I mean, there's some stuff out there that's pretty good. But I don't know if there was one specific show I could tell you that like I just have very fond memories of growing up watching. Um, so I couldn't say I have a favorite cartoon or anime, but at least one from growing up. Couldn't tell you. Oh, and then the fun question. So Seneca for 199. I know you asked this, but I appreciate you asking in general. Um, but yeah, well, that's a really good point. For progressives, living historically is evil. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. If you live historically, that is by definition evil, right? That's just that's the case. If there was this conversation. Sorry, Seneca, I will get back to that, and I'm being a little disrespectful, but this is just a rant based off of the essay that I recommend you guys read because I'm going to add a second part to it, and this is a big part of it. Is that when you live in a world that has idealized sort of the Marxist as well as the Fukuyama notion that the history has ended, you become a people without history. And once you've erased history from being this concept that exists within the person or within sort of the, I guess, the noosphere of a civilization, particularly white Westerners, Americans, and just the greater European West to some extent, not nearly as much as America or not nearly as much as Britain. I think this particularly affects the Anglosphere more than it does the continent of Europe. And this is why there's a huge divide between the continental European New Right, just also Britain as well, and then sort of the American rightists in that respect, because they'll clash in their writings, and you'll see it. But, living historically is evil because it is to acknowledge that there was something that was pre-existing prior to the present age. And if you only look at the world through the present age, anything that is opposite of that is so foreign and alien to you, it has to be destroyed. It has to be eliminated. It has to be killed. It has to be ruined and destroyed. And that's just the clear and present case for the left. This is that, historically speaking, the world was better. This is why there was this like tweet that went out a while ago where it was like high school of, seniors from 2002. That was 22 years ago. These people are in their, they're 38, they're in their mid 40s or they're in their early 40s. And someone was like, I would have been called like a faggot, or someone would have called me a queer and like thrown me in a locker 22 years ago. And it's just like, well, probably, like, you probably deserved it, but also because we can't document any documentation about why the past is good or why things functioned better in a more like homogenous or more we actually arrested people, a society with less anarcho-tyranny. All of a sudden, that's evil. We can't go back to it. We can't do anything about it. That has to be destroyed. That has to be done. And all of a sudden, just put it away. We're over and we're done with. That's it. So to live historically is to be evil. To live with any tradition is evil because that identifies with a time and a place that to them they just call fascism. Like, Marx opens the Communist Manifesto saying that there's a specter of communism haunting Europe, right? But all of a sudden you realize that the specter of the post-World War II order is the specter of fascism. I mean, Paul Gottfried, and I'm going to have an essay out on this eventually. It's just like Paul Gottfried's book on anti-fascism, A Course for Crusade, is really important reading because the definition of fascism has changed so radically that a 1990s Democrat named Donald Trump is essentially the next Adolf Hitler, despite the fact that Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump are two vastly different people on two vastly different political issues, or all political issues, really. I'm sure there are some parts where they got along, right? There's a New York Post article where John Kelly, I think it was one of his chief of staff or whatever, was basically saying, yeah, Trump said Hitler did some good things. And it's like, well, there's the Autobahn and other stuff, but like, okay. But again, everything has to lead us back to the ghost of these people. I mean, even fucking Curtis Yarvin, of all people, wrote about this in an essay called Killing the Ghosts, which is probably one of his best gray mirror essays he's ever done. And that's just sort of the world that we live in, is that we are haunted by the idea that somehow Western peoples and Western nations that arrest criminals, deport foreigners, let their nations be strong, healthy, religious, in whatever tradition that they're in, and have healthy birth rates is antithetical and, antithesis to this greater chiliasm of liberalism. And so ergo it must die. And this is why I say over and over again, for progressives and for leftists, their ideology is suicidal ideation on a civilizational scale. And they welcome in the doctors that will put the drugs in them that will eventually kill them. leftists are all just waiting in line for their own medical assistance and dying. That's all that they do, and that's who they are. But Seneca for 199 asking the questions about my prayer corner in the back by my nightstand. So who do I have on my wall? All right, so I'm just gonna go from top to bottom, or just topping around. Top is Christ. To the one by him, of course, is the Theotokos, Our Lady of the Passion, Saint John the Baptist and Forerunner. My patron saint, Saint Matthew the Evangelist, Saint Herman of Alaska, Saint Salvus, the New of Columnus Island. A minor icon of all the feasts, one of Saint Seraphim of Sarov, who was given to me by my priest. And then that lovely thing up there next to it is the thing from Owen Cyclops, who did one for various saints of America, which I appreciate. And then the one on top of my gun safe over here is one I painted, which is the Virgin of Three Hands. And if you notice, that table right over there is where I'm slowly getting to work on King David, holy prophet, and King David, the psalmist. So I've been doing the pattern, and I now slowly have to etch in the lines onto the board. And then this week, my teacher and I will be doing it together. So it'll be a lot of fun. So that's why I'm streaming tonight, and I may have to reschedule the Digital Archipelago because I'm going to be busy this week, both with job interviews, but also working on icons. But thank you, Seneca, for the financial support and everything that you do. Greatly appreciate it. So on to chat. Let me take a look through here. Favorite band. Whew. That's a fun question. So I have the music taste of an early 2000s shitlib. So I'll give you a twofer on this one. One of my favorite bands of all time is the Decemberists. They're all massive liberals and shitlibs, but Colin Malloy's got a great set of pipes, and they still put out pretty good albums. My favorite person I've ever seen live, and I've seen him live twice, and it's still the best live show I've ever been to. And people always laugh at this because I, enjoy his work and his music. But the best live performances I've ever been to have been Weird Al. Actually, I've seen Weird Al live twice, and he is probably it's probably the most enjoyable show I have ever enjoyed. So yeah, that is for sure. My favorite piece of fiction, pen, is still the Brothers Karamazov. It's definitely the thing that kept me from being a full-blown atheist in high school and in college. Outside of Dostoevsky, some of my favorite fiction, of course, comes from the English canon. Charles Dickens is one of my favorite writers. William Faulkner. Absalom is probably up there as one of my all-time favorite books written by an American and written in the English language. And it makes me kind of really depressed because most of the American canon of great literature and great novels can't be read unless you're biblically literate. And most Americans aren't anymore. Like, for instance, the title of that book, Absalom. Do you know who Absalom is from the Bible, from the Old Testament? If you don't, good luck understanding what that title's in reference to in the story. Good luck understanding anything that Faulkner ever read, or any of the Southern writers, who a lot of them ended up converting to Catholicism. But it's something I think really important to consider, that for us as Americans, so much of our literary tradition, I mean, even, Nathaniel Hawthorne or Washington Irving, some of the last Puritans, if you don't understand scripture, if you don't understand the American religious context of the nation's founding, you're not going to understand anything about our canon of literature and the writers that we've put out. Even Herman Melville's works, unless you know the Bible, good luck understanding some of the deeper themes and context to that work. And it is a great tragedy. And I think that there was sort of this weird milieu of film and articles and debate that sort of emerged with new atheism in the late 90s and early 2000s, where all of a sudden there were people in pop culture as to terms with the fact that we're kind of a post-Christian society. We had thoroughly secularized ourselves, in the 30 years from the 60s to the 90s. There's a whole generation of people that don't really know anything. And the moral majority was kind of dying down with its power and influence in politics. So, I mean, like the movie Seven, right? I think is a really good example of this. I mean, it talks about the 7 deadly sins, and also sort of the reference to John Cassian's The 8 Vices. And all of a sudden you're sort of realizing that it's more of an aesthetic than it is about being literate or understanding these stories at all. And it becomes really depressing to consider that. But I mean, some of my favorite authors and books are, the Brothers Karamazov, the Idiot, Absalom. As I Lay Dying. I mean, that's more of a collection of stories and stuff from Faulkner, but I mean, that's also a novel. But a lot of that stuff is not just there anymore. I also like Orson Scott Card a lot. I know that a lot of people give him shit and maybe have some issues with the whole Ender's quadrilogy in his other works, but I think he's still one of the better science fiction writers in the United States. So things to consider. Absolutely. Oh, but who cares? Oh, I guess I'm missing. Um, people in the past couldn't coom as much, so clearly things were worse in every aspect. And I mean, isn't that kind of interesting to consider how like, oh, I said this a while ago, and unfortunately, it kind of went. It got more views than a usual tweet of mine because I never tweet to get views. I just tweet when I feel like tweeting, which is the opposite of why you have Twitter, right? But I had said, have you ever noticed that the language about onanism has like changed from like fapping to gooning? Like it stopped being this like one-off thing, and it started being this thing that you do like a job, you know. And I mean, it's infected all that like Zoomer discourse about edging and shit. And I apologize for the crude language, but it's just a point to consider that for a generation of people that are having less sex than their parents did, and those people had more sex than their grandparents did, that now we treat our own self-abuse and debasement as if it is as it is a job. You know, all of a sudden we are doing things where we talk about like games as a service, or like games where you have to grind out your daily objectives to get your reward points or the battle pass or whatever, and then you never play the game again. I mean, it's almost as if they're doing the same thing with their own masturbatory habits, and I find that that's incredibly depressing. Where all of a sudden, no, all that we really do now is just, you know, we just goon, and it's just like, well, what the hell does that mean? And then you end up like the whole fucking Norman Finkelstein bit about gooning, which is kind of like bizarre. But that's just sort of the world that we live in 2024, and it's absolutely depressing. But yeah, things to consider in that respect. You know, they're just, yeah, clearly they didn't coom as much, and that's why the world is bad. I know you're being partially sarcastic, Cindy, but in a world where like, I hate to use the term sexlectics because I know that as soon as you invoke that word, Basil will quote tweet you saying like, people talk about this, and it's like, yes, we know, yes, we get it, but it is the sad state of affairs, right? And that's just how the world is. But oh man, I can tell you what not to do. Red Hind a Monkey. I can tell you what not to do. I'm a professional progressive. I work in the nonprofit sector. Don't do what I do. Not a lot of job security, not a lot of money. But I'm in college, and I was originally pre-med, but I've been dissuaded from many people on this path. Thanks. Well, I would consider being in the medical profession, actually. I know that you're going to have a lot of problems with the DEI stuff. I mean, you will in any industry. We talk about like, the woke going away, but like DEI and the whole anti-white hiring practices are in every industry possible. But you should have the skills to, you know, take care of your family. And I mean, that means medical stuff. I think that every person should have rudimentary medical training or understanding, and at the very least be CPR certified and stuff, right? But you should consider that. I think that we shouldn't be so. I feel like a lot of the discourse about, you know, jobs or professions boils down to what is your timeline for collapse. You know, like if we're all plumbers and builders and electricians, like when shit hits the fan, we can inherit the earth. And to some extent, I get that because the competency crisis is here to stay as long as America keeps focusing on hiring unqualified people who shouldn't be in those positions in the first place. But at the same time, I think it's important to consider that we do need highly trained professionals, and we should be reclaiming those spaces because people want to flock to quality. People want to flock to the world that has them ready to hold their hand and let them back into reality. There were two essays that I was recently reading. One is from J.A.Cus, and then the other one was from Mystery Grove, of all people. And both of them had very similar takes. One by Mystery Grove was just talking about like the radical psychological changes of the last 20 years, where there are millions of people in America and in the West in general that are saying that we should all die and that we shouldn't have babies because of climate change, or, you know, like the world's going to end anyway. So like, why don't we just all enjoy ourselves and screw and just die? And then the other one was talking about the one from J.Cus was about the need for a right-wing Obama.
And he wasn't referring to someone who was like suave and could talk in front of the cameras and could do the teleprompter just right. But it was more or less about the holding people by the hand. Like Obama was the end for liberal white guilt. This was how utopia was to be achieved. Clearly, it didn't. But, the essay itself was just saying, like, conservatives should be able to rehabilitate and walk libtards away from their crazy, insane positions and bring them back to baseline, sensible, centrist reality and rule over them with an iron fist. And I think that there's a good claim to make about that. I don't know how viable that is in electoral politics these days, but I think that I don't even need these on. I'm not talking to anybody but you. But anyways, I think it's sort of an important thing to consider that those things be put in mind. And you're going to need as many white collar versus blue collar professionals. I mean, that's just a requirement, right? Half our things would be solved. We could just call them gay again. I mean, we should. I know there's the whole. Of course, you got to be nice and you got to play it to the whole. I guess the optics game, or not wanting to get banned off Twitter or YouTube. But I mean, God, we have some really gay and stupid things that we treat so seriously in our society. It's so frustrating. We really shouldn't. Because a lot of this is pretty gay. Like, let's not kid ourselves. Like, the world's it's a pretty gay place. Let's not kid ourselves. Yes, and I know you're gonna do the whole this guy eating beans, copy pasta, but yes, I do, and I have a lot of bean recipes I look forward to getting into. Assuming a person's politics is partly informed by their psychology, is there a place for liberals in the world where the right has reclaimed power? Well, yeah. I mean, this goes back to the whole client-patron network. I mean, if you're a progressive and you have progressive opinions, odds are you benefit from the progressive worldview and the idea of how the world operates. And you should seriously consider that worldview. In part because if their whole worldview is indoctrinated by television, media, academia, financial, governmental, and legal incentives to be a libtard, if you're in charge and you control all those things, there's going to be a lot less libtards. And the whole dissidents that you see will probably be like, I don't know, some anarcho-kitty commies that like found a copy of the Communist Manifesto in like a library that didn't get rid of that book or something. And that'll be something to consider. But while I'm here, let me go just reply very politely and gently to where is it? There we go. Let me go quickly add this into the replies to the Twitter thing. So people, if they want to send a super chat, they can via Twitter. So that'll be the reply in the post. But I appreciate everyone who's tuning in over on Twitter. It's kind of nice to see the viewership over there, even if there's not a lot in the chat comments. I know that the whole live streaming to Twitter thing is changing, but I mean, Duke de Sel, cul-de-sac, that's actually funny. You should consider that if you're in charge, your ability to change their psychology and their socialization means that there's just going to be less liberals in general. I mean, there'll just be less of them. He'll be eating beans in a week. That's very true. And it was funny because the week prior to Meat Fair Sunday, I thought that Sunday was Meat Fair, which was the Sunday of the Prodigal Son. And so that entire week that was fast free, I was just eating as much meat as humanly possible. And they're like, hey, you have another week to do that. And I was like, oh. So I did it even more. I'd been stuffing my face like crazy. But thank you very much. I appreciate that. Inspired by your Reenchantment Substack, planning to visit some historical towns in Maryland this year. Well, I highly recommend it. I mean, if there's any place where you're going to feel the old Anglo-America, it's going to be New England. As terrible as parts of New England have become, Baltimore especially, you really can't help but appreciate how beautiful that part of the country is. It is beautiful. The East Coast and New England in general has some of the most beautiful parts of the country, at least for historical old-timey America. I mean, there's old Route 66 places as well. I mean, the whole country's been beautiful, but yeah. Something to consider. But yeah, no, I would I would consider that. Most recent concert I've been to, I saw Andy Schaaf years ago. I haven't been to a concert in a very long time. Although I've been to, well, I mean that's a concert. It was a show in a bar, but I mean I've been to the symphony recently. I still take advantage of that. I went to a Tchaikovsky showing not too long ago. So yeah, I guess that would a band called the Decemberists are a bunch of libs. Color me surprised. I know they're all libtards. Who would have guessed? Who would have guessed? I mean, it was inevitable. But I mean, that's the problem, right? Like I you grow up with I grew up with like country and like the Beach Boys and a lot of the '60s stuff. I saw Toby Keith live more than I'd like to admit, but that's just sort of the way that the world works, right? You just have to take the good and the bad. Podcast recommendations that aren't poisoned by the woke or horribly depressing, aka about politics. Well, outside of listening to my friends, I don't listen to a lot of what's that word? I haven't listened to I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. Most of my time I spend reading. Outside of a few people in our spaces where I listen to people, there are people I try to catch live regularly. Dave being one of them. I listen to Oren even when I'm not on it, right? And I listen to what Dimes and Judas over at Blood Satellite do, and I listen to Content Minded with my co-host Geo. But like I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't. A lot of my time, listening. I mean, I'll watch a Patrician TV review. God knows that that's true. I'll listen to an 8-hour review of a video game I'm never going to watch. But I don't listen to a lot. Most of my time is spent reading, or I'm listening to music, or you can't tell, but like my shelf over here is full of sheet music that I also practice and work on because I sing in the choir. But yeah. Oh, and you say I find myself listening to a lot less dissident content lately because it's so depressing. I don't know if everyone's depressed, but for me, it certainly has been an enjoyable lot of just I've been consuming less for the last year, and it was a purposeful decision by me because if I'm consuming less, I'm forcing myself to read more to just be because people will reference books all the time, and for instance, there's so many good books from our friends over at Imperium Press and others publishing houses where it's just like, well, I need to actually read these things before I just take other people's takes for granted because I don't want to outsource my own cognitive ability to process information and to do it myself. So I've been trying to do a lot of that. So, I mean, if it's depressing to you, I'm sorry. I feel like this is the important need to have some silver lining in the things that we talk about. But even then, I mean, things are pretty dire. Let's not kid ourselves. We need to be aware and realistic that things do suck. But they could be better. And I think that it's important that we focus on all of our efforts on how to make things better everywhere that you can. What was that last? Oh, this was the video stuff, or the essay, or the fiction stuff. Orson Scott Card, the whole Ender's quadrilogy. So Ender's Game, Xenocide, or Ender's Game, Speaker for the Dead, Xenocide, and oh god, whatever the last one was called off the top of my head. If you want something that's a little more schlocky that I really enjoyed, I would recommend Robert Buettner's Orphanage series, because it's basically what if we took the concept for, or like the Paul Verhoeven Starship Troopers thing, like an asteroid hits Earth and it was done by the aliens and we have to go fight them, but it's set in like global war on terror peak Americana. So, you have America getting the world together to go off onto Ganymede and kill a bunch of bugs. And I don't even think there are bugs in his story. I haven't read it in so long, but Robert Buettner's Orphanage series is great. I loved it as a teenager. I'd have to reread it. I'm sure it hasn't held up very well, but it was cool to me, and it felt more like quasi hard sci-fi. I know that's such a loose term, but and I also quite enjoyed The Three Body Problem. I haven't gotten to the sequel or the third book yet, but I mean, I enjoy it for probably not the same reasons that maybe hard sci-fi guys like. I enjoyed it because I got to understand how the Chinese look at the world, and I viewed the whole that stuff and the Dark Forest concept to be a peek into the psychology of Chinese writers or Chinese foreign policy people. So for me, it was more of a understanding of geopolitics than anything else, And I think those are important things to consider there. Sorry there. Anonymous for $10. Thank you, sir. He sends this over on Entropy. He says, Electromancer here. So an electrician. I fell for the boomer join the trades meme. Any advice on upward mobility or on right-wing activism / organization? Well, it's funny because my choir director is an electrician, and he loves his job. So I guess it just depends on who you work for and what you do. But I mean, the trades are still important. There needs to be a balance, and you should be doing a job that you like, but also doing something that that can provide some security. And electricians are always going to be needed. With respects to upward mobility, I mean, either like you can stick to it and start your own business right after you stop being a journeyman and you have your master's electrician and you can start your own business, but I mean, also it does require you to network and to utilize other skills. I mean, again, New Founding has their whole job thing where they, want to put you in touch with people that aren't going to fire you because you say a man is a man and can't be a woman, and a woman with a dick is not a woman at all. And of course, I mean, activism is always a double-edged sword. You always have to be careful who you associate with and things like that, and be comfortable that could cost you your livelihood. I mean, remember during the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, there was a gentleman from Fairfax, Virginia, who was a firefighter who had his, the whole fundraising stuff leaked, and he was fired for that purpose. So it's always important to consider that in anything that we do is being on the right. But it also, I mean, there's the Old Glory Club chapters that are being formed everywhere. There are, of course, you have the Beowulf Foundation and basket weaving, these sort of ways to just network and know that you're not alone. And I've met plenty of people through my Twitter mutuals that have connections and can, help you either get hired or can, get you some work to do on the side to hone your skills. But I mean, again, we shouldn't abandon the trade. I mean, we shouldn't abandon higher education, and we shouldn't abandon advanced degrees and advanced technical knowledge. It's going to be incredibly circumstantial based on where you live and what you do as it is. You do have a skill that is labor intensive. Obviously, it's very blue collar, but you shouldn't, maybe disregard it entirely. And those still are going to be good skills to have, whether you stay as an electrician or not. I mean, just don't zap yourself too much. That's all I'm going to suggest in that respect. At least you're not an artist. No, I'm not an artist, but I wish I could be, I think inside of everyone, I think that's the big problem that someone had made a reference to, is the whole right-wing theater kid thing. Because there are a lot of us. There really are. But at the same time, you also have to consider the desire to just simply live your life as it is. And if you're going to do this content stuff, right, you have to be a little bit of a narcissist to the degree that, like, you have to be willing to put out content and to talk to yourself and to look at yourself and to spend 45 plus minutes editing audio of your own voice where you slowly look towards, that lovely little, it's like the whole reference to Moe from The Simpsons, not today, old friend, not today. And I don't want to just kick the bucket, so to speak, and hang myself. But that's something to consider. But DEI is worse in the medical sectors you serve at the pleasure of proud female minority. And if you're not willing to kiss up to that kind of person, you're in trouble. Your license can be revoked. Not always, but something to keep in mind. As Spandrel said in the bio-Leninism essay, like, you can be in power as a white guy in these professions. You're just going to have to bow down to the great Zimbabwe 5 times a day. If you can do that long enough to either A, go into private practice, or B, get into a position where you have fuck you money, I would recommend it. I mean, because, for instance, as all the stats sort of speak for themselves on the medical questions. Like, I kind of want to go to a doctor that I know probably didn't need a lot of help getting to pass the MCAT, or isn't someone that I think is going to not have a problem if he kills me or kills my elderly parents when the time comes. It's sort of just those are the things to consider. These are all if stuff though. And also I do agree with Seamus here. You shouldn't really listen to it. And I don't want to cover, and I don't want to cover politics 24/7. God, if I did that, I would go fucking insane. I mean, it's a big part why I wrote the re-enchantment essay, because I was like, well, I'm going to talk about my vacation, and I'm going to talk about why I could take something away from it that wasn't 100% political, but also because I love my country and I love the people that I talked to, and it was a good time. And in the same way that we shouldn't be afraid to talk about pop culture or to talk about stupid stuff. I mean, I play with a lot of my friends and Twitter mutuals over video games and talk about stuff that we're reading and working on. Like, there's more to life than just this material to consume. You know, I mean, some of the stuff that I do read, yes, can be absolutely political. Other stuff, not so much. Like, I'm currently reading, you know, Father Spirit and Bailey's The UFO Deception. And I mean, there are things to go through. I'm also taking my notes because I'm going to be reviewing Samuel Chamberlain's My Confession with the Sidebar podcast guys very soon. We're going to record that, I think, this weekend. So plenty of stuff down the line to consider. Yeah, I agree with this wholeheartedly. And there's a reason why I think about James chapter 3 all the time. Anyone who is a teacher, and to some extent, commentators are teachers because you are trying to instruct or catechize people into what you believe in and your ideology, right? And that's something to really consider. And so those people are judged harshly, as St. James tells us in his general epistle. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, if that's the case, and I'm to be judged harshly by my creator for the things that I have said, and the books will be opened up, and everything I've ever said will be used against me if it's been unrighteous. And for me, especially, I want to ensure that whatever I say is used in a way that encourages people based on their circumstances, their ability, their knowledge, and what they can learn, and their general capacity to learn will be utilized in a way where they will be in the best position that they can. I want all of you to be successful. All 689 of you watching right now, both on YouTube and Twitter. I want you all to be successful. And some of you already are. And some of you are young. Some of you are older than me. Some of you are like, this guy's a fucking moron. So be it. I wish your success, and I wish you well. But yeah, I would agree with that. And also, a lot of it can be cope. But it also depends on where you live. My question skipped over with a cough and a sip, many such cases. Well, I'm just scrolling through. I'll probably find your questions. Do I watch any combat sports? I watch a lot of fencing. I have a buddy who does a lot of fencing. I used to do a lot of SCA prior to my transplant in college, where I would don a suit of armor and get my ass beat all the time. So I have a deep love for the duel. Anything with fencing is something that I watch very closely. I watch fencing at the Olympics because it's a combat sport, and there's something very beautiful and martial about the duel. It's my thing. I don't know what else to tell you. I like that, and I know it's not a combat sport, but I also like, you know, watching people fish, like the Bassmaster Classic. I like that kind of stuff. So things to consider. But for me, it's fencing and dueling and things like that in general. And something I actually want to get back into, because I don't think it would be too dangerous for my post-transplant ass to do. So it would also be a great way to stay in shape, outside of what I'm already doing between running and dieting and stuff like that. So yeah, absolutely. But let's keep scrolling through. Oh my god. I see we're doing the meeting Ryan Gosling in a grocery store copy pasta. I greatly appreciate that. That's funny. But I'm not gonna. I've gotten to a point now where that happens on a more regular basis when I'm out in like the DFW area, and it's still getting weird. I'm not used to that. WW says, listen to BAP's new episode with Eric Prince. It's very good. I have not listened to the latest episode of Caribbean Rhythms, although I do listen to Caribbean Rhythms now and then. Yeah, I wouldn't go near to Baltimore either. Not at all. But I mean, there's things to consider. I mean, there's historical touristy parts, like just, you know where to avoid. Okay, everyone knows to lock your doors by Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Just, I would expect that the people here would have the prudence and the discernment to not be morons, depending on where they go. I mean, for fuck's sake, Thomas 777 lives in Chicago. Like, just don't be a fucking idiot. Yeah, I really don't know what else to tell you there. Just don't be stupid in that respect. And Anonymous replies to me again on Entropy for $3. He says, "My brother in Christ, I've been zapped by lightning changing outlets." Well, thank God you're alive. Because I've had my choir director tell me horror stories of people getting injured from both electrical charges and not being safe. So, I mean, thank God you're alive, you know? Have I read Jean-Luc Marion? He's a Catholic and who was a student of Derrida. No, I have not. Jean-Luc Marion. Well, that's going on my list of people to read in the future. God Without Being, The Erotic Phenomenon, Being Given, The Idol and Distance. Well, these are going to be things that I look into in the future. So that's now added to the bookmarks. Thank you, sir. I'm going to read some of that stuff. Yeah, I mean, that Charlemagne has the right answer. If you're in a trade, you're supposed to start your own company if you want upward mobility. I mean, being your own boss, that's the objective, right? That should be the case. English and history. I have 2 liberal arts degrees. I can tell you a lot about what not to do and what you know, versus what you should do. I can tell you a lot about what not to do. I have 2 bachelors of arts. Don't, you know, I can only give you so much advice, and most of it is what not to do. I had minor in political science and American history. They're not that great. I thought I was going to be a lawyer, and then Providence had it other ways in my life. So yeah. If you know any Chinese, yes, the 3-body problem and his other stuff is reflections of their mentality, which is why I enjoyed reading it, because it was an insider view to how they look at the world. Also, woman ends the human race, essentially. Like, well, I could have told you that, right? But yeah, no, it is something to consider. I have no idea what that's in reference to. Nothing boomer meme about the trades. I have multiple 6-figure positions. Again, everyone's different on their circumstances. Everything is going to be different on circumstances, and that's considering. No, Seamus. No. I don't even want to read your question. If I gave you $100, would I spend it on No. Why would I put my life in jeopardy or at risk? No. Also, I don't even know. Well, no, I don't. I actually don't know any. I don't know that many in real life. So no, I can't tell you that, Seamus, but I appreciate the $4.99. It's a funny question. But that is the danger of the super chat, right? Hello, Cody. It's good to see you. So yeah, I'm trying to go off names that I've either met in person at conferences or remember in general. Would I ever consider backing Doug's push for $7.25 an hour? Are we talking about Doug the intern? Doug is an intern. He doesn't get paid. That's an internship. He doesn't get paid minimum wage. He gets paid in the ability to learn the art of the Twitter post. You got to learn that, General. You got to learn that. One of my favorite non-political topics is podcasts about people drowning in cave diving accidents. That's fucking depressing. I think one of the things for me are not podcasts, but I quite enjoy it when I see YouTube videos of people that buy small aircraft. Like they'll buy like a Piper Cub or a Cessna 172, and they're like, "Hey, I bought this plane and then I flew it halfway across the country." Because if there was one thing that I could just drop money for to do, would be to get my pilot's license and fly around. I love flying. That's one of my favorite things. So yeah, it's definitely something to consider. Mark Gates says, hello, frogs. Well, hello, Mark. Welcome. But let's see here. Have I ever read Disagreeable Tales by Leon Bloy? No, I have not, but I'm now going to go look it up. 1894 short story collection by the French writer. Consists of 30 tales set in Paris, focusing on criminality, perversions, and other subject material typical of the decadent movement. The common theme is faith in God and a spiritual crisis. No, I haven't read it, but I wouldn't be opposed to reading it and maybe giving it a review. I would like to write more book reviews. I read all these books and then I reference them, but then I never write about them. Charlemagne also does this on his Substack, which I actually pay for. So you should be a patron to your friends. because he does book reviews on a lot of interesting geopolitical stuff. He's reviewed a lot of Russian books as of late, so I would consider that. I mean, every major higher institution is like this. Medical school, of course, is the worst, but yeah, it's pretty bad. Oh man, what have I missed out here? Well, Mark, I haven't talked to Daryl Cooper. I mean, we're mutuals on Twitter. I would love to talk to him. I know he did his own version of the Stalin War series, so I would like to talk to him for the first time. I've never been on a show with him or anything like that. I know Jay Burden recently interviewed him, but I have not read anything of his, So no, I have not. I haven't talked to him. Would like to, certainly would, but no, I have not. I have not read or I've not talked to him. That's really all I can say on that respect. I have, yes, on that question. Have I read any of Dubois? Yeah, I have. I've listened to On Being a Pagan. Skeptical Waves has it on his channel. I did listen to that. I found some of it interesting in the same way I find some of the European New Right to be interesting, but also antithetical to my own existence, sort of as a white American Christian to some extent. But I mean, I did read it. It was interesting. I haven't read his other stuff on Beyond Human or whatever, but I did listen to the audiobook version of On Being a Pagan. Fishing is a combat sport. Well, what's the literary theme? Man against nature. So I guess so. You could say it's a combat sport, man against nature. But I mean, the combats. I like fencing, and I would like to get back into that. So that's for sure. Scribe 8762 for $5 US, and this is over on Entropy. See, this is why I need to stream from OBS rather than StreamYards. Might save myself some money that way as well. It's been over a year since I last asked you this. I hope you've done your homework. What is your favorite Space Marine Legion / Successor Chapter / Chaos Warband? And I'll tell you what, Scribe, I haven't done my homework because I am the worst right winger on Twitter because I'm not a big. Never got into 40K. And I wish someone would tell me where to start, and I might just start reading the Horus Heresy and go from there. But again, don't have an answer for you, Scribe. I don't. The more I look at it, 40K seems interesting. Looks great as hell. I've played Battlefleet Gothic, and that's more of a space combat game with fleets and stuff. But again, I don't have an answer for you, Scribe. And there goes my right wing card, right? I should just put it out on camera and do that way. In that respect. But yeah. Speaking of us wonderful to be speaking of wanting us to be successful, it took me 2 months longer than expected, but the demo of my game will be out in the first week of April. Well, Cine, I will play the demo live on air. How about that? You tell me what it's called, and I will go play it on air, and we'll get that demo going. But yeah, just tell us what it's going. It's going to be a rhythm game, but with the story of an RPG, trying to trick Zoomers into consuming a story with based messaging. Well, I hope that it works. And I hope that it works. 2024 from Pete Budapest. Well, Pete, imagine. No, Pete Budapest says, I'm getting the sense that the left is exhausted. Am I right, or is this just a calm before the shit show starts before this presidential election cycle? I'm going to go with calm before the storm, just because I don't have a crystal ball to tell you what this election cycle is going to be like. It's not like the Republicans have done anything on a federal level, and a lot of states haven't done a lot of things on a state level to make 2020 any different. The big difference is that everyone knows Biden sucks. Like, everything has sucked objectively under President Biden. There's not one good thing I can think of to be charitable to this administration that he had done. I mean, even if you tell me the insulin prices thing, Trump did it first, Biden rescinded it, and then Biden put it back in to claim credit for it. I mean, there's nothing good out of this. There's nothing good. Everything's been worse. Inflation, the strategic reserve, America's position in the world, the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, the domestic shit has been, the whole Doug Mackey and the anarcho-tyranny on a statewide scale, the deliberate invasion of the third world into my country, being flown into middle of nowhere white places. It's sort of the Tikkun Olam, immigration policy that this administration wants to run. So, I would imagine that this is the calm before the storm. I mean, there's a lot of this that is a repeat in a lot of ways, for instance, where you have what's the word I'm looking for? Like, we had the same Super Bowl, players. It's the same guys on the ticket. There's no real challenges. I mean, every candidate that's run against Biden in the primary, they're all mugwump candidates anyway. I mean, even Kennedy is to some extent as an independent, claiming to be against, corruption and things like that. We can do better, but I think that there will be a shit show. I just don't know what that shit show is going to look like yet. So I would consider that in that respect. Anonymous for $3 US over on Entropy. Thank you so much. He says, have you researched your family history? I can trace mine back to England and the colonies. My family is Mormon, so we have collected letters and journals from our history. Well, I know that the Mormons do a lot of emphasis on family history and to bring the ancestors into it, so to speak. But I mean, yes, I do. I have a lot of research on family history, both from extended family, but as well as myself on my own time. I have some fun Civil War history in that respect, and I can trace my some of my family history to Scotland and other parts of England as well. So, but I'd have to consult with this large volume of stuff that someone on my mother's side has done. But yeah, I have. I highly recommend that people do it. And again, I mean, this is something I wrote in the Reenchanted Substack, was just that if you're not doing, actual tangible tactile things, like for instance, a lot of my, see if I can find a notes here. So for instance, when I do like book reviews, right, or I talk about things with like my patrons or whatever, I handwrite all of my notes. And I think it's important to do so in the same way that you should be doing things with physicality. Who's making photo albums these days of their families? Who's collecting all these old records and such? I think it's important for us to do that because, a hard drive is cool, but that can sit on a shelf and never go away, right? That's something important to consider. Something to always to do, to be, you need to do it. I mean, there needs to be more physical things. There needs to be photo albums. There needs to be tangible, tactile proof that we were here. And I say this as someone who isn't even anti-tech. I'm not a neo-Luddite, but I certainly believe wholeheartedly that we should have a lot more things in the real just as much as they exist digitally. One thing is clearly more asymmetrical to the other. It's very much not congruous to what we do online versus what we do offline. And that is a big byproduct of the mediums that we exist in, or the media that we exist in. Garfellow Roosevelt for $5 US says, who needs 40k when you have Halo-based single-species space empire defeats cringe multi-species space empire? Well, those two are vastly different, and I think that I would still like to get into 40k eventually, or at least read about it. I like reading sci-fi more than I do interacting with. I live forever from a game store, so it's just hard to find people to play games with. I used to do a lot of stuff. I used to play a lot of Flames of War. I used to play a lot of various RPG stuff. I used to do some of the like Star Wars miniature stuff as well. I miss having that close by, but I have to drive a considerable distance to find gaming stores and to find people to play with, and I just don't have the time anymore. But I certainly wish I did. But I mean, there's always the books, right? I mean, even Halo has some really good, like Ghost of Onyx is still one of the best Halo novels ever written. And I'm sure 40k's got stuff like that I could really appreciate. So I mean, I would appreciate if chat were to send me 40k novel suggestions, because I would sure as hell read them and talk about them. And maybe I can force Geo to talk about 40k rather than us talking about some television show about, just gay, fat BDSM appreciators in Canada. Then Hunger for $10 US. He says, normally there would be a lot of political energy around this time. Has Yarvin been proven right that political and intellectual energy on the left is completely dead? Ask me that question in 3 months. Wait until we get closer to the election season. Because I don't know if it's dead completely, but I think that they're struggling to find answer. And this is the problem with all religion, ideology, Weltanschauung that try to answer world problems or understand how the world works. is that unless the left can effectively answer why the leftist project has failed, which is why they always view things in the lens of the present. We must return to the eternal now in order to have a future where, it's okay to, it's like the Chobani commercial, right? Where it's all a bunch of like my migrant, farm pickers, but they all live in huts and there are no white people and it's solar punk. Like that's the future, right? But it still operates within the worldview of the present. Unless they solve that, I think that he might be right. But again, I'm also not reading a lot of current leftist literature because so much is still built off of the intersectionality model of like Butler and Crenshaw and others. So I don't know. I mean, like, it's not like leftists still don't control universities. I would imagine that we're going to see something emerge in the next, couple of months, if not next couple of years. I don't think it's dead completely. They might return to something older. They might return to some kind of like Marxist analysis that isn't, as race heavy, maybe more class heavy, which, I mean, in America, race and class, there are differences. But I mean, let's face it, when we hear them talk about class, I know that they're talking about like middle class white people that they want to eradicate, right? Like, let's not kid ourselves. But I don't know if it's completely dead. I think maybe we're saying it's completely dead because we're just not reading them. And also, like, the big lefties on the internet, I mean, it's not like they read. We know that they're idiots and then they get marching orders. There are very few people on the left that read anything and have anything interesting to say. And so I think only time will tell in that respect. Is Creeper Weirdo here? Who knows? There's like 800 people watching. Anyone could be doing that. But I just got to scroll through chat and such. Is this a pop-up ad, Brent Taylor? I feel like, the hot singles in my area meme is here to play there. I love Pete Budapest. He's like the best donator to the Old Glory Club. He is. He's one of the strongest soldiers, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, I'm now realizing that chat is going. I'm so behind when it comes to chat and such. That's definitely true. Well, there you go. That's an interesting counterpoint. Being an American is suffering when trying to find out family history. I mean, it depends on when your family got here. Then things get interesting. Like if you're pre-Ellis Island, then it gets really fun. Post-Ellis Island, I don't know. Yo Mama, that's a funny one. For $5, asked, do you think that there's any future for space exploration or is it doomed to fall to DEI? Well, I think this is why Charles Haywood and a lot of people have a lot of hope in Elon Musk, because he can prove that it's done and capable to be done so. But I mean, also he's getting sued by the Department of Justice, this administration, for not hiring enough asylum seekers and refugees and non-citizens. But because he's contractually, because he has contracts with the DOD, which prevents him from hiring those specific groups of people. So it's sort of a race between how fast can the American desire to worship incompetent, diverse candidates, if they want to worship like, the great Zimbabwe, or do they want to like go land on the moon? Clearly Elon wants to get out of here because I think he realizes that if his ambitions are killed, no one's getting there. At least no one in the West is. And who knows if China or anyone else in the Asiatics can. So it's sort of a race between how fast can he tell the regime to go fuck itself versus whether or not he gets there in time. And I think that's the big race. I'm optimistic he can, but I'm also blatantly aware of political reality that they're doing enough to screw him as it is. I mean, whether it's between the employment packages stuff or investigations or calling him out and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's not like they've forgiven him for Twitter, right? The whole Twitter buyout. And it was cool that he quote tweeted in reply to Orrin McIntyre earlier today, which was a huge, huge W, right? Like calling Biden a puppet or talking about immigration. He got in trouble for the retweeting the frog wave tweet, despite the fact that that was a totally true tweet and that he got in trouble for. I don't think that he wanted to go visit another, I don't think he wanted to deal with another, ethnic humiliation ritual, but I think it's important to consider there. So there you go. Well, there you go. Well, I'll consider that, Charlie. I'll do that. Just buy a rule book and read it. I own it. I have not read it, AOH, but I do want to. Seneca for $4.99. What do I think of cryptids/ghosts/demons? Do you think Bigfoot, skinwalkers, wendigos exist? Yeah. Simple as. I think they exist. Why not? You know, life is far more interesting when the world... I mean, there is evil in the world. I mean, demons are real. All this other shit might as well be real as well. So let's go say yes. I say yes. Definitely stuff is out there that I wouldn't go with it. Pick an edition, buy a codex and rule. Okay, get it. Check. I will go read some PDFs. Luthemplar for $10 US. Should I engineer a microbe to remove microplastic from the balls or reduce calorie intake? Well, I've jokingly said on Meta Prime's podcast that whoever invents the supplement or the tool that eliminates microplastics from the testicles of every like white red-blooded American male is king of America. So, I mean, there is a crown lying in the gutter for you, mad scientist Luthemplar. I say go pick up the crown. Just don't kill us all like, you know, some people like Fauci want to do. Oh, I thought I was caught up with chat for a second. I was like so excited, but no. I was wrong. Pre-Ellis Islands, but still end up here in the Rust Belt. Roatlessness has felt hard. Well, I mean, I'm an army brat. I grew up as rootless as it gets to the definition of that word. So I know how you feel in that respect. I live where my family calls home, and I still feel rootless as hell. So I definitely know how you feel. That's something to just consider. But yeah, I mean, protect the balls. It's as simple as that. You got to do what it is. Read. What is this in reference to? Was this in reference to the Hyperion thing that I mentioned earlier? There you go. Convert photoestrogens to photoanabolic. Like, I mean, hey, let the scientists deal with this. I can tell you all about budgets and numbers and how to plan projects, but yeah, there you go. Let's see here. Also, Gaunt's Ghosts in the Eisenhorn series is a good jumping off point. Well, let me go look that up. Gaunt's Ghosts novel series. Gaunt's Ghosts is a series of military science fiction novels by Dan Abnett in the 40K universe, inspired by the Sharp series of books written by Bernard Cromwell. Well, that's going on the list of things because I liked Sharp, the TV show, a lot. So I'd have to go do that. But yeah, I'll consider. Why not? We'll do it. Let's go for it. Fuck it. We'll read them all. Anonymous again says, I am the Clayton Bigsby of Ellis Islanders. Sorthy or not, I'm not going back to Sicily on account of my great-great-uncle. That being said, mix like Biden gotta go. Well, Anonymous, I just assume that you're in New Jersey now because like every election in New Jersey between Republicans and Democrats is between Irishmen and Italians. And so I just assume that you're just from New Jersey now. That's in my headcanon. Anonymous is a New Jerseyan. So, you know, if the Italians and the Irish, that's every election cycle. Luton09 is a great guy that makes deep dives in 40K lore. He has a playlist that explains it all. Yeah, why not? Sure. That'll be fun. We need to see the Shrike on screen. The state of New Jersey is the digital archipelago. I mean, it's certainly an ethnic battle between Italians and Italians and Irishmen. That's what makes it so entertaining. Like the last 6 election cycles there, it's just been an Italian guy versus a Irish guy. That's what makes it so great. But no, the digital archipelago might not be live at its regular time this week. It is entirely dependent on how far we get along working on the icon that I'm working on this week. A Geo versus a Prude. Well, I have some Irish in my ancestry. I've never done a 23andMe, and I don't want to because I don't want to give away my genetic profile. But Geo is also like Brazilian and Italian, so it's like the ultimate swarthy versus the ultimate Northern European stuff. Let's see here. He is always LARPed as an Ellis Islander. Well, interesting. Well, that doesn't surprise me in the same way that George W. Bush is always LARPed as the Texan. Let's see here. Yeah, they won't use your DNA for evil. Absolutely. I do think that the future is not going to be nuclear, but it will be highly tailored biological weapons by both state and non-state actors. I think that that's very realistic to keep in mind. But yeah, I would consider all of that. Also, I would recommend Mine Were Trouble. You know, all the Peter Kemp books that they had it. So I mean, the Spanish, and plus Vista by Foucault's got a book series, book series review and discussion on the Spanish Civil War that I was listening to that was quite good. Toby Turner becoming anti-vax and somewhat of a libertarian was not on my docket, but here we are. Well, anything is possible in 2024. How W got away with that fake, condescending, top fake Texas accent is a true marvel. Well, I mean, he was there for a while. I mean, it was something. Not all that is completely fake, but also, I mean, you can see Bush interviews now, and he still doesn't talk too differently from how he did 30 years ago. Something to consider in that respect. But Anonymous is correcting me, letting me know that he's from Florida. He works with a lot of certain people that are to support millionaire wasps. I'm surrounded by aliens. It is painful. I can only imagine, Mr. Non-Anonymous. I don't live in Florida. I live in Texas in a pretty white area, and it's kind of nice. It's very nice. It's very nice. But neither here nor there. I definitely get it. Did you give your DNA to the Mormons or Susan Wojcicki's sister? Neither. I wouldn't dare. But I hope no one's done a. I wouldn't go so far to say that it's not possible. Also, it was really funny because I think was it her sister or her cousin? She was doing this like there was this NPR article about like women in business. And then it's like, oh yeah, we brought up so and so to talk about, you know, who should be on this woman's list. And they're like, well, I think Susan Wojcicki should be on this list. And she's like, well, why do you think she should be on this list? Because she's my sister. And I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. It's so incestuous and disgusting that there are just no words to describe how evil the press really is. Something to certainly consider with that respect. And it's just all terrible, all terrible. All terrible. Oh, good Lord. But yeah, what on earth is happening here? All fake and gay. That's certainly life in general. Well, I wouldn't know if it's gonna. It'll be purple and then it'll go blue eventually. Well. To put on my serious cap for a moment, I would say that one would it depends on what happens here internally with the GOP in Texas. They don't seem to be courting them as much as, say, Trump is. I mean, for instance, the 2020 election saw the Rio Grande Valley, which has been historically blue for years, go pretty strongly for Trump and swing far to the right. But, I mean, again, things would change pretty quickly here if deportation, remigration, and, you know, proof of citizenship to vote was required. But also you have to cut down on ballot harvesting as well. Like, I mean, the electorate is still more white than the rest of the country is. And that's something really important to consider. But I mean, again, you're going to witness I mean, Texas is going blue without a doubt within the decade. I mean, every Republican governor that as long as I've been alive, has always been about supporting bringing business to Texas. And all that means is that you're importing people that don't vote Republican. Although in 2018, more people that came from California to vote for Ted Cruz voted him than native Texans did voting for Beto O'Rourke. And that does illustrate demographic shift. And I think that's important to consider in that process. Any thoughts on Haiti? It's been a shithole since the Haitian Revolution. It will be a shithole 200 years after the Haitian, 200 years after this present age. There's not much to add to that respect. I mean, let's not kid ourselves, right? It's clear as day between the Dominican Republic and Haiti, right? Unless you're going to recolonize it or clear them out in some capacity, shithole forever. And I would consider that respective Um, I mean, again, like Haiti's a great. I mean, also does everyone? I know people have been pointing it out on the timeline, but like, does not everyone forget that all of a sudden we were having people go out and about for what's the word I'm looking for? Going out and about to talk about how great Haiti is after Trump called it a shithole country. I mean, Conan O'Brien, Ryan Wilson, all these like just libtard actors going out and about explaining how wonderful and Haiti is already great. And it's just like, okay, I just saw on the timeline earlier today someone eating a person who has been sitting in a fire. Don't talk to me at all about that shit. It's all awful. It's all awful. It's all awful, and we don't need to to deal with it with that respect at all. But yeah, I would consider that within its entirely. I mean, I would I would. Well, that's you, Jacob, not me. Conan O'Brien is a snack to General Barbecue. I mean, yeah. Republic should receive a license from the Pope for the conquest of Haiti. I mean, if Eric Prince, it might be fake. If we're hearing reports about it within less than 24 hours of a coup, and we don't hear about that when like there's a coup in Sudan or in other sub-Saharan African countries, I don't know. My HBD brain tells me that something else is going on. So I'm real or not, it's spiritually true, but I shouldn't be operating in that context. I do want to operate more so in the truth than anything else in that respect. And we should be, at least, right? Yeah, they'd be wild, like should start doing that in regular conversation. Like, hey, have you seen Africa Dio? Like, we're Italians. I have to tell everyone that. But yeah, I would not be. What commentary is there to say? I mean, there was that like Alex like Wartresh tech or tweet today about how the nativists think that like if they bring all these Haitians here, they're going to eat people in America, and it's like, well, it turns out that happened in Florida, that a Haitian immigrant ate someone. So like, really, are we so surprised? Not to mention all the other problems that come with immigration. That's just definitely the case and the reality. I mean, full-scale collapse is definitely coming. There is no news. There is only pain. Well, not everything is painful. And I think that's the big divide between... It's like the guy in the bus meme, the one that looks on the mountain and he's all depressed versus the guy that looks out into the mountain view and he's all happy and peaceful. Sometimes the timeline is the mountain. And then sometimes the real world can be the nice view, and it can be vice versa. Like the real world can be shitty, and then the timeline can be cozy. You just can't fall into the trap of digital escapism and being deracinated by your time online. That above all else is what matters. And yeah, Zarathustra, I agree. Seeing him retweet the take and agree with it was nice. It was good to see that. So for once, Oren McIntyre had like an 11 million, impression tweet. That's fantastic. That's good on him. I think the best tweet I've ever done got like 600,000 views. So there you go. Reeks of some sort of elaborated... guys, it's Haiti. You do not need an elaborate psyop to realize that there are some people that just can't run in a functioning government or country to make that work. So yeah, I wouldn't consider that. But also, like, the same thing that happened with COVID in the E-right, where just it broke people's fucking brains, is going to happen here as well when it comes to and it's already happened with October. I mean, this is why I tell people to read Bleak House by Charles Dickens so much, because a lot of the critiques that Dickens lays out, especially about like telescopic philanthropy and sympathy, we've never fixed that problem. And we should be better about it, because I need to be focusing on how do I help my own people, and how do I focus on helping myself and my family and my kindred. And if I can't do that, and I'm so focused about when something happens halfway around the world, like, is it a Mason psyop in Haiti? I don't give a fuck. As long as they don't come into my country, that is not my problem. And I know that seems rather short-sighted, and I know that, yes, I live in the heartland of the global American empire, where gay race communism is everywhere. But it is... I have to pick and choose my battles, and as long as I can get them not to come here and I can deport the people that are already in here, that should be my focus in that respect. And I think that's sort of an important thing to consider. But that would require the people in charge of us to actually care about us, and that is the big problem. Twitter contains and dilutes the right-wing discourse. There's an argument to be made that pre-Elon Twitter was actually better because the evolutionary pressure of being banned randomly kept certain people away, and then it forced you to be better about how you argued it. That was either more normie palative, or you could be even further to the right without getting in trouble. So I don't know. And maybe that take is a provincial one. I care more about my immediate area than I do there. But as a human being, I don't have infinite. I'm not God. I don't have infinite compassion and mercy. I just have the ability in working with myself. And I kind of, want to focus in that area. Yeah, I saw your chat, Bolero. The soul patch is just me not shaving this morning. I mean, that's all that it really is. But there you go. Thoughts on the Houthis targeting the U.S. ship Pinocchio? Which one is that? U.S. ship Pinocchio. Let's see here. Let's just read this from Reuters earlier today, actually. Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthis targeted a ship that was described as the U.S. ship Pinocchio in the Red Sea, according to a speech of the group's spokesman, Yahya Sarri, that was released and televised early on Tuesday, so obviously tomorrow in their time. The group will escalate their operations in solidarity with the Palestinians, they said in the speech. Well, why are they calling it the Pinocchio? This is breaking news to me. Sorry, I'm getting the same Reuters Thompson news line, so I don't know what that means. But I'd have to check what the shipping guys have to say, and I don't have an immediate take on the subject matter because everyone's just retweeting the same Associated Press or the same Reuters Thompson news headline, so I don't have anything to really add on that respect. But I mean, I'm not too sure. You could say it's growing on you. Yeah. I'm not sad a ship called the Pinocchio sank. Again, I don't have anything else outside the news wire. But it's important to consider that in that respect, that's not going to stop anytime soon. The thing that did surprise me when I talked about it initially at the beginning, I want to say in December of 23, was that I'm genuinely surprised Egypt has not been forced into I figured they would have they would have had a timeline or a deadline on this issue faster than anyone else, because quite a bit of, when the Suez Canal, you're having basically a new Suez crisis, right? And if Egypt is suffering, and so the Israeli ports are suffering as well, like 85% down from shipping the last time I read. If you're seeing a significant decrease in shipping amounts, you already have a massive problem with both the Suez Canal, to where the Egyptian government has been trying to clamp down on illegal irrigation and modification on the port areas. That would not surprise. I figured Egypt would have acted sooner, and I don't know if that's due to American aid or tax dollars, or that they already have a tense relationship with the Israelis because they don't want to take any Palestinians either. I don't know what's going to happen if we're just virtue signaling with this whole port business. If we're going to build one, I would anticipate that that's going to aid that they hit the ship. Yeah, no. It doesn't. Let me see here. A container ship that the Houthis are claiming 15 minutes ago that they already hit the ship. Well, if they haven't sunk it, that's one thing. But again, that's breaking news that maybe I need to revisit the Gulf crisis in general, because it's been about 3.5 months since I've talked about it. And half my audience anyways keeps pestering me, asking, when are you going to talk about geopolitics again, Matt? When are you going to talk about that again? Well, sounds like soon. So I will probably be talking about geopolitical stuff in the future very soon. Pete Budapest says, I'll re-up this. I think the left is offering an argument for why the liberal project has failed. It's that people like you and I exist. That was the whole Biden State of the Union was. I did not watch the State of the Union. I played video games with my mutuals on Twitter, which maybe could have been a bad thing. But if right-wing reactionaries like us exist, and that's why the liberal project has failed, and that's his argument. I mean, how I understood was the theme of the State of the Union. I saw this in a report or a news wire before it went off, was basically asking the question, whose side are you on? And I mean, this is an election year, speech for Biden. And so, I mean, he made it abundantly clear whose side is he on when he apologized for using the word illegal. Yeah, like an illegal immigrant killed, Lake and Riley. Okay. And he apologized for using the word illegal. I already know what side he's on. It's not on white people's side. It's not on anything on that. So yeah. It was a combination of horrifying and retarded. Well, that's been the last 4 years, right? It's been horrifying and retarded. He's clearly on the side of no Americans, absolutely. Thoughts on Kristi Noem's, the bill on anti-Semitism. Well, I would certainly like to read parts of the gospel or Acts in public as a street preacher to see how quickly I get arrested. That's always been my position, is that a lot of those bills that are meant to quote unquote curb a certain kind of anti-ethnic animus, A, usually generates more, B, fulfills a self-fulfilling prophecy when it comes to those criticisms, but C, and just to me as a Christian especially, is meant to legally prevent me from proclaiming Christ. So don't know what to say there, other than what I did see that was listed in that law, and what would constitute criticism was basically like, oh, I can't literally, read the part where, St. Peter tells the Jews of Jerusalem that Jesus of Nazareth, the Son of God, the Christ that you had not listened to and crucified, sounds like it's really going to just target me. And also that dispensationalist nonsense. I would highly recommend people read the article by Whitney Webb about Christian Zionism. Has always been a friend of Missouri. Yeah, I'm sure it has. I'm sure that it has. How's Missouri doing these days? Again, there's a couple of great books on that. One of them was written by Stephen Walt and John Jim Mearsheimer on a certain lobby. So things to consider, but I'll leave it there for now on that issue. It's a disaster. And it's so depressing in that respect. It really is. I don't have any other words for it other than just to say it's depressing. So there was this joke by, I want to say Piff Jack, like a year and a half ago when we first started doing the show, where someone was making fun of me in like one of those like Giga Chad discourses, and he was just like, yeah, I cover geopolitics. He's like, oh, you talk about like Geo-Pinochet, and it's like, no, I cover international relations and how nation states are. And he's like, well, I know he's a fat guy, but he's not that big. You don't have to be so mean. And it was just this little shit post of me getting flummoxed over it. But many such cases. Although I would rather not talk about e-girls. Half the time he mentions them, I have them I have them blocked. I block most e-girls. I don't there are like 5 women I follow on Twitter, and they're all like, they all work in like the American Mind, and then there's Alex Kashuda. I'm working with Catherine D helped me get a magazine piece in somewhere. So they're like 5 women tops, and one of them is Dave's wife, and then the rest are all there. I'm not an e-girl person, that's for sure. Bad theology makes for bad politics. Well, bad theology makes for bad realities, and that's a line I get from Dr. Henry Hopwood Phillips in one of his articles that he wrote in I Am 1776. And I think that it's a very good article to read and to consider. Because again, if you have a bad theological understanding, your political theology, your worldview, your look at the world is going to be a disaster. And that's just the basic truth of it all. And as a Christian, you need to have the proper theology of the gospel, lest you fall into the disasters that is that crazy dispensationalist nonsense. So yeah. Thoughts on Kiwi Farms? I mean, everything that he's been doing to keep that place alive is a good thing. And Keffel's delenda est. Simple as, and also, it's kind of strange to be streaming both on Twitter and YouTube, because the view count right now is 114 on YouTube and 805 on Twitter. So to the Twitter bros that are watching this or just listening to me rant and rave, I sincerely appreciate you doing this, because it's weird to see how this plays out. But yeah, that is the dynamic. There is a Laurel and Hardy to every duo who do things. I mean, there is Mr. D and Academic Agent. There is Nightmare Vision and General Dove and Citizen of Night Owl's fame. There's Geo and I. And there's always that kind of duo. Yeah, and Twitter does have a chat. I know, but you don't. And it's funny because StreamYards will tell me if the chat is from YouTube or from Twitter. But I mean, people are either just watching or listening, and I appreciate it nonetheless. You should watch Josh's conversation with Benjamin Boyce. Fascinating guy. Well, I will probably do that. Ben Boyce is like, this isn't to criticize him because he's had me on and I do watch some of his stuff, but Ben Boyce is interesting because he's just like he's like the interest in, he's like the student of Alan Watts, and he's just like casually, he's just like, and he's always interested in what he has to say, and he'll ask some questions, and he's good at doing this, or he'll get into things. And the way that he looks at his wife when he does these live streams, it's very wholesome. But no, I'll have to watch that interview because I do subscribe to Mr. Boyce, and so why not? Interesting, even though I don't think he's just I don't want to call him a normie, but I just want to, he's just not like he's not fringe or extreme to any degree. I think he's a man that's just realizes that the world that we live in has gone absolutely insane, and I cannot fault him for that under any way, shape, or form. So that's just the truth of the fact of the matter there. But in the meantime, I'm going to give some housekeeping announcements and such, where I'll just go through the shows. It's always about that conversation. That is true. It is about it is always a conversation. Yeah. I mean, Josh is fascinating. Well, that too. Josh is a fascinating guy. Your series on McMeekin's Stalin's War got me into his World War I stuff. Just finished it a few days ago. It's great. I mean, McMeekin's book, I bought his book after I watched his lecture on World War I at the National World War I Museum in the United States. The July 1914 Countdown to War is one of my favorite history books I've read in the last 10 years. It's really good, and I would highly recommend that. July 1914 and the Russian Revolution, A New History are both really good texts. I haven't read those two. I've read, and I've already read Stalin's War, but there'll be a new chapter of Stalin's War out next week. So, depending on whether or not I have the Digital Archipelago live this Thursday, I may put out a talk this Thursday as well, and then next week there will be another Stalin's War episode out to the general public. The patrons always get to see those early, along with some of the paywalled essays and to see other stuff that are behind the paywall, including the gaming streams on Fridays. And then after that, there will be some more book reviews coming down the line. I have most of my notes to write a review and some chapter-by-chapter thoughts on the Jacques Ellul's Propaganda. So that'll be dropping on Substack soon. And then I've just been on a lot of shows as of late. I was on Buck Johnson's. I was on the Meta Prime podcast. And I'll put out some little Substack saying, hey, here's where I've been these last couple of weeks. And then, of course, I'm a regular on Oren McIntyre's show, to which I'm always grateful to be on the Boomer Whisperer show, where I try my best to focus a lot on immigration and other culture war issues. But no, I mean, I've been genuinely blessed in that regard. And I think that's very something to consider. Not Omegon for $3 US says, read The Siege of Rax. It's a blow-by-blow siege story. If you have an email, I'll send you the PDFs. If you go to the About section, you'll see the email I use for this channel. I check it regularly because I do a lot of correspondence and businesses, the Prudentialist, with that email. Go ahead and send it to me at, just the Prudentialist1, spelled 1-O-N-E at gmail.com. And you can do it that way. So I would consider that. I understand we don't hate Roosevelt enough. The question is do we hate Eisenhower and Marshall enough? Well, Record Deepness, I have a book on that. Actually, give me 2 seconds here and I can bring it up. Let's see where it is. Okay, so yeah, this is one of the texts that I have that I haven't read, but I was going to, since I wanted to read about after Truman and after, well, it's about Truman and Eisenhower, but it's called Politics as Usual: The Age of Truman and Eisenhower by Gary C. Reichard. And I was going to read it this year and review it. So we'll find out if I should. I don't know enough about Eisenhower to really hate him. I think one of his more crowning achievements was the National Defense Education Act in the 50s, as sort of a response to the Soviet Union and Sputnik. So I think that's important to consider. Do I know much about New Zealand native frogs? They suck at swimming, don't croak, can't really jump, pathetic but cute. Sounds like New Zealand politics as well. Not really by the time they show up, the space is dead. Oh, I don't know. Talk up the OGC event. Hoping to get Oren to sign my copy of the Total State. Odds are he will. He'll happily sign a copy, I'm sure. What can we expect this summer? Well, you'll see a variety of conversation. The theme is about taking the reins, and it is going to be oriented around whether or not this quote-unquote vibe shift is real versus whether or not it is all in our heads in terms of the internet and if the energy is shifting. People like myself, Oren McIntyre, Jeff Deist, Radical Liberation, Stephen Carson, the Distributist will be speaking. And, we're going to be asking those questions. What kind of reins can we take? Can the culture war be won? Can we escape it? What should we be doing right here, right now in 2024? So if you've been to conferences hosted by the Sildings people, it will be similar in that regard. But also we will have our friends from the Double Dealer magazine giving us some hardcover editions of their publication. We'll have a tailor there for you to order suits and stuff to look your finest. But it's going to be a good time. And I mean, as with all these sort of conferences, they're there, of course, with OPSEC in mind, but also to facilitate an exchange of ideas, network, and meet people. There are people in this chat whom I've met in person, in real life, and have made friends with that way. And I would recommend that people do that. So buy your tickets now at club.com. Hello, Miss Vallejo. And I hope everyone else is doing well. What else in chat am I missing? Thoughts on Ezra Pound. The cantos are beautiful. So it's really all I can recommend there in that respect. A lot of people consider him to be the first example of what they would call prudential politics, working within the realities of what can be done. To a point where if you were there was a point on Google Images that if you looked up prudentialism or prudential politics on Google, the Wikipedia page for prudentialism would show up, but it would show my frog PFP for a while, which was quite interesting. That's long since passed, but it has that was a very funny thing to consider. Who is that reading the advertisement of the event? That would be our good friend, Not Me, Not You, who is a member of the board and a good time there. That's for sure. But yeah, I have that screenshot. Oh, so do I. I think it's an old tweet of mine that I didn't delete. But yeah, you could look up like prudential or like prudentialism, and then it would be like, well, prudentialism is like, this like politics there. And then all of a sudden it was the frog. And I was like, hey, that's me. Like, thank you, Google, for associating me with that stuff. I greatly appreciate it. At the end of the day. And that's probably one of my favorite ones. But yeah, there you go. I've answered a music question. Although most of the stuff that I enjoy is from Stephen Sondheim and the such. Thoughts on so this is back to entropy here real quick. Thoughts on the Taco Bell in Oakland ending indoor dining due to magic Americanism? Well, is anyone surprised? I mean, you saw this in California too, where Governor Newsom was asking like his cabinet, like, why are things so shit and why are stores leaving? Which of course is that progressive passive voice to abdicate any responsibility. Is anyone surprised? Like, we don't arrest criminals because that would be racist, because most people who tend to be criminals are exactly who you would expect. So it's one of those one of those things to consider. Just that's the reality of it all. But yeah, it was, well, I don't have an answer for that, Yo Mama, other than The real question you should ask yourself, was it ever straight to begin with? And then you can go from there. And it was, I think, at the turn of the century, and then after the 20s, it kind of gets wonky. But let's see here. I have a book on that, actually. Give me 2 seconds. Maybe we can find an answer together. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Is this it? No. No, where did they all go? I have a whole, like, there we go. Let's see here. Maybe we can find the real problem in Gerald Boardman's American Musical Theater History. Just go in and say you're out, right? After the 20s, it got turned out. That's probably the case. But let's see here. Yeah, probably somewhere in the 20s. I don't know. We could find out. I have a whole book on it. I have a whole lot of history books on the American theater, along with some biographies of a lot of that stuff. So you need countercultural musical theater. See, the person who should do this would be if you could make Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, but based. So just do a whole grand sweeping narrative about like what he was, why Hickory was based, and do it like that. You could have a lot of success in that regard. Just I'm spitballing. I don't have full ideas on that issue. But hey, that's the point of a live stream. None of these thoughts are ever complete. And that's the world that we live in, right? That's just the nature of how the game is played. But I mean, also, just if you're going to be an artist, I would recommend it. I mean, there are people who are novelists and painters that I want to support. I mean, I would recommend, like, here's a good example. I'm just going to show off books because I can shill stuff, like there's Owen Cyclops's, collection of webcomics. There's the whole babyology thing. Go do that, that's a good thing. Support people that make art. I mean, support the Double Dealers, support your artists, support Dora, support any artists that you think are worthwhile in your time. I mean, there's a lot of them. There are dozens, if not hundreds of people in this space that write fiction, do music, do poetry that isn't explicitly political. You should do it, and support it and read it, things like that. Unqualified Reservations, the musical. It would be there would be a 3-minute like solo reprise for the end of Act 1 where it's like nothing but ums. It would be a 3-minute song about ums, I would consider that. I mean, yeah, Fenn, Geo, Matthew the Stoat. I mean, all these people out there who are artists and create things. There's so much to be done. There's so much to be done in that respect. So I would consider that. Thoughts on Obama? I don't think that the right fundamentally appreciates how much damage he did to the United States in his 8 years in the presidency. He said he was going to radically transform the country, and by God, he did. So, that's way too bright. Let's change the screen a little. Ugh. But yeah, I mean, I wish people would seriously consider that the 8 years of his time in office and his administration, he did accomplish his goal in radically transforming the country. Even his first 4 years as president in terms of foreign policy, as well as with the domestic stuff, because it wasn't just Obamacare. There's a lot of stuff in there to consider. So yeah. I would highly recommend that people, and I think we're going to be doing this over on the OGC, is we're going to be doing like a retrospective on the Obama administration, because there's just a lot there that we don't take for granted because we have the political memory of a goldfish because of Twitter and YouTube and drama. But I'm of the opinion that he was one of the most consequential American presidents in the history of this country for the worst. Camp of the Saints, the musical. I would just go outside and just film the local Walmart or film the cities of Dallas. Retinas annihilated. Yeah, I wouldn't want to. No thanks. The Obama phone birthed Black Twitter. Maybe. I don't know. That's something to consider. That's actually a really funny idea if that is actually true. Right? Like, that's the story of how it all gets started. There's another one I did miss over on Entropy. Hell's Reach is a 100% recommended book on 40K. There's even a bomb 3-hour fan animation movie on YouTube. Well, there you go. I have enough 40K content to keep me busy. The road to Obama runs through his disastrous and destructive presidency. I would see more of what a lot of the things that Bush did in both in term 1 and 2 get reversed under Obama. And you can talk about it being him being the most consequential. That would be the argument saying, well, really, if that's the case, 9/11 would be the most consequential thing. Because, okay, let's go with this. Let's go with this question, Pete Budapest. What was one of the biggest hot button political issues in the United States in Bush's first term prior to September 11th, 2001? And if you can give me that answer, then we can have then we'll talk. But his presidency is not as consequential as what Obama did, especially second term Obama. Like, you talk about second term Bush, who got nothing done after 2006. But no, the biggest hot button political issue of 2001 outside of 9/11 was stem cell research. It wasn't Social Security privatization; it was stem cell research. That was the hot button culture war issue. Was that issue? Social Security privatization is never going to ever get touched. China spy plane incident. Well, that the problem hasn't ever left us. But I would argue it's that specific issue. What was the culture war issue on that? Sounds like a dream, right? The privatization of Social Security. Actually, if you want to have a really fun time with that, I have a book by Maureen Dowd called Bush World, where it's like right after Bush gets elected, and she's talking about how awful this presidency is going to be. And I think I might review it on stream one of these days, just so we can talk about what a different world it was 20-something years ago. Yeah, I forgot about stem cell research. With the benefit of heights. Well, I don't know if I want to admit my true opinions on that event publicly. That's for sure. Also, I'm never going to say, yeah, I've come to the conclusion I'm never going to see a red cent of Social Security. Just never. I operate, I just operate under the assumption I won't. And it's kind of funny. There was 2000 election was an issueless campaign. It really was. Because because Bush ran on the campaign that, like, Al Gore is the continuation of the moral degeneracy of Bill Clinton. So, yeah. Who remembers Terry Schiavo? Oh, man. Yeah, what a fun time. I won't even see Social Security, and I'm Gen X. Yeah, that's... There, I'm sure he's some kind of, as all mainstream guys are, but I mean, Billy Cobb put out a song where he was doing the Bowling for Soup 1985, and he was going back in time to 2005, and it's a good little parody and riff of the Bowling for Soup song, and it was kind of funny because he talks about, he'll never own his own land, and it's like, yeah, most people won't. Most people won't. Most people won't. If Bush had done a 2001 version of the 1924 Johnson-Reed Act and enforced it, he could have secured the American future of this whole century. And then, yes, the see you next Tuesday word. Well, we'll never get that, will we? We'll never get that. We never will. That's just sort of the... But also you have to understand, like, Bush wasn't ever going to pass a restrictionist immigration policy. Bush was... Bush, to this day, in terms of stats on election results, has one of the highest Republican vote turnouts from Hispanics for a Republican in a major presidential election. I don't think that number has been topped since 2004. But, I mean, you can look at his old website from 2000 when he was running. It was a radically far more conciliatory, this is our answer to the emerging Democratic majority. You're never going to get that anytime soon. Well, I mean, I pray that that becomes... I hope we get something like that again. That would be nice. That would be nice. Oh, I wish. So true. Yes, the old libertarian point that it is indeed a what's the word I'm looking for? It was indeed a Ponzi scheme. It's true. Okay, and who took advantage of the libtardery? Like to again, I'm gonna just reiterate it. I think you have to consider one of these things is bad. One of them takes it far worse, and I'm still under the impression it's Obama. On a domestic level as well as an international level, I think that you have to sort of consider both. You have to consider one did far more damage than the other. One did far more damage than the other. But that's just my opinion. No, just no. The sneakers are bad enough. Like everyone forgets this. They vote. Precinct captains vote. Fat, obese people that work in election centers vote. Sure, Brexit can be a thing, but yeah, let's not kid ourselves. Come on, let's be more realistic. But I think that's going to wrap it up here on the questions for tonight. And this was fun to see how well it did on Twitter. Maybe it'll be that successful if we have the Digital Archipelago this Thursday. If not, I will put out a Real Talk video this week. But I'm going to be sort of away from content this week. That's why I put out so much last week. I also learned a really big important lesson for the YouTube stuff that never do the from channel members to public. It algorithmically fucks you over. It's not good. The algorithm will screw you. So for me, it will be on that issue coming back. I'm not going to do that again. I would highly recommend that you people do watch and share the Andrew McLuhan interview. And in fact, I'm going to post that in the chat here, and I'm going to put it up on screen. Actually, what I will do is I'll just show it up here on sharing screen. So what I recommend that all of you lovely people do is just simply go tune into that. If you haven't seen that already, I highly recommend that you do, because again, that I learned my lesson. I'm not ever going to do that again, but I'll just happily share screen here real quick. Yeah, I don't think that they'll ever do that. The interview is the message. Yeah, that might actually break the internet. If he comes back to Twitter, that would be great. And I think he will as he gets closer and closer to doing that. But yeah, I highly recommend that you guys just tune into the Andrew McLuhan interview. Highly recommend that. It's in your best interest to do so. But outside of that, I will be putting out either a new video this week. I have a few essays in the works. The next thing that I will come out is the Don Bluth Anastasia review. I watched it recently with my girlfriend a while ago, and it was just interesting to watch a film that has nothing on that issue at all. Or on the actual martyrdom of the Romanovs, but we'll get into that later. But I'm glad that people are sneeding and doing sneed towers rather than in towers. That's a much better than anything else. And thank you, Jacob, for your financial support. I greatly appreciate that, sir. But either the Digital Archipelago will be live this week or next week, depends on how much work I get done on the icon. And then until then, I hope that you're all doing well. This will be hopefully monetized. Thank you all for your financial support. And we'll be back soon. So have a good evening. I pray that you all do well, both on Twitter and all your endeavors. And we will probably conclude with a little bit of reading. Give me 1 second. We will conclude with one thing here. One thing. As I so often like to conclude my live streams, I like to read a little bit from something good. And of course, the good news. And the good news, of course, that is all out there. So yeah, consider this, and this, we'll do something from the Wisdom of Sirach, or Ecclesiastes for our Catholic friends. And this is from chapter 20 of the Wisdom of Sirach. There is prosperity in the midst of adversities, but there is also a sum realized by a sale for a loss. There is a gift that will not profit you, and there is a gift where the repayment is double. There is loss because of glory, and there is a man who raises his head from a humble state. There is a man who buys much with little and pays it forward sevenfold. A wise man will make himself beloved through his words, but the kindness of fools will be forgotten. The gift of a senseless man will not benefit you, for his eyes are many instead of one. And he will give little but insult much, and he will open his mouth like a herald. Today he will lend, but tomorrow he will demand it back, for such a man is hateful. And a fool will say that I have no friend, and I get no thanks for my good deeds, but those who eat my bread are worthless in their speech. And how many will laugh scornfully, and how many of them, and how often? A slip on the ground is better than a slip of the tongue, and the downfall of evil will come speedily. And a man without grace is like a story told at the wrong time, and it will continue on the lips of an ignorant man. For the parable from the lips of a fool will be rejected, for he does not tell it at its proper time. So, I will hope that you're all doing quite well, and we'll see you all soon. God bless, take care, and stay prudent, everyone. I'll see you around next time. Good night.